today we're going to talk about the topic of equal rights to education. That could be the topic of today. And our guest today is a 31-year-old political science from Stockholm who founded a non-profit organizations to provide computer education for children in Ghana. And Torsten, who's our guest today, Torsten Kjellgren, he founded the organization called IT for Children 4 years ago. And today that organization has grown to, it has grown in its capacity to be able to provide free education today for almost 2,000 students every day, or children in Ghana. And I'm always impressed when people kind of dedicate their time, energy to contribute to a bigger benefit for the collective. So I want to say warm welcome to this interview today, Torsten. And do you want to open up with where are you in your energy level? How are you today?
Thank you very much. I'm very excited to participate in this interview, I must say. So I have to say that the energy is on top, very positive.
That's a good sign, right? So if you would explain IT for Children for someone who doesn't know what it is, or how would you explain the organization that you founded?
I think the idea is quite simple. Then the way to get there was somewhat complicated. But the idea is simply that I think it's a human right to have access to all the information that we take for granted in a country like Sweden. In Sweden, 95% of the population, almost everyone, has daily access to internet and computer. We take it very much for granted. In Ghana, around 30% have access to computers and internet. And most of these people live in the big cities. So if you go to a small town or countryside in Ghana, West Africa, nobody essentially has used a computer. And this goes beyond age or education and stuff like that. So if you meet a 12-year-old, 13-year-old, they have never used a computer. So I think that's the sort of like gap of justice and fairness that made me kind of decide we have to do something about this. But then there was an absurd situation that gave me the idea to start the organization. And that is that in Ghana, they have mandatory IT education. They have mandatory IT classes in school, but they don't have any computers. And most schools don't even have electricity. So I visited a school in Ghana and I saw a teacher trying to explain to the students were around maybe 12 years old, how to use Excel. And none of these kids, I talked to them, none of them have used or even seen a computer. And they were supposed to learn how to use Excel looking at a textbook. And the teacher was talking. And I thought, this is so absurd. How would anyone learn? How could you even try to understand how to use a computer if you never sit in front of a computer?
That's crazy. It's like trying to play football without the football.
Exactly. So I thought it was so absurd. So that's actually how I got the idea. So we started very small scale in terms of collecting refurbished secondhand laptops in Sweden. You know, so many people are upgrading their laptops all the time. So we collected mostly from friends, family, and stuff like that. Shipped them down to Ghana and essentially introduced computers for kids in a small village called Buswa, where I already had a network of friends and people I could trust and people I could involve in the project. And now this has grown a lot. So now we're operating in 2 different villages where we built our IT academies. So on the rooftops, we've put on solar panels. So we're relying on renewable energy, which is also very much reliable in Ghana compared to the normal electricity grid, where it's just lights out all the time. And we've filled these classrooms with laptops from Sweden, donated from persons in Sweden, but also companies, schools. And then we providing IT education primarily every day for free for 2,000 kids. And it's Ghanaian teachers, local teachers who are teaching them. And then besides that, we're not only doing IT, but we're doing a lot of things that will both improve or help the kids in their schooling and in their education in terms of English, math, science, all that. But also we have a lot of things that we think can sort of complement the regular schooling system in Ghana. That has to do with independent thinking, analytical thinking, and things like that. But when we look at what we've achieved so far, just looking at our students is quite remarkable. So the first class that we had was, I think, late 2015. And then we introduced computers for the first time. Then we had 30 students in a classroom. And the first task was how to turn on a computer. So the kids had to identify the power button and press it and turn on the computer essentially. And these same kids who are participating in this class now have developed their own games and websites. So now they're sitting and coding in Python primarily, and they already master Excel and Word and internet for various things, just like any teenager in Sweden. So that's quite remarkable. It's the same. I mean, they were small kids back then, and now they're teenagers, but it's the same kids, and they know so much more about the world as well, not only about computers, I would say.
That's beautiful. It must be quite a journey to build. Like the feeling of seeing that journey must. I'm guessing that would give you a lot of satisfaction too.
Definitely, and I think it will be even more satisfactory once we follow these kids in the future and see how these skills and knowledge can help them in their lives. In terms of supporting themselves, supporting their families, maybe pursuing different dreams that they have, different interests, and how it can help them in their education or in their career. That will be, I think, even cooler. But already it's quite remarkable when you see that it's the same kids, it's the same individuals that were introduced, so complete beginners a few years ago, and now they're very outstanding, I would say, in IT, and have so much knowledge about the world, and also they've accelerated so much in their schooling as well.
What are the kids telling you? What's the response once they get this opportunity?
It's very different kinds of response. Of course, when kids are so diverse, and it's different ages, right? So the ages we have for our students is between 7 and 15. So essentially just following the schooling system. And I think when we introduce the computers from the first time, it's quite natural that it's very interesting, especially for kids who are maybe 9 or 10 years old. It's almost like a magnet, that if you never use the computer and you get introduced to the computer, it's naturally very interesting. But then what to use it for can mean a lot of different things, and interest can be very different, of course. So some kids have maybe been very very taken by the fact that they can design things, they can sit and play around in different designing programs, whereas other kids have spent a lot of time maybe reading about the world on Wikipedia, or surfing around on Google Maps and exploring the world. So they've used the computer, I think, for a lot of their own interest as well, besides the fact that they've gotten proper education from our classes. But the response has been very positive from the kids. Then, of course, sometimes it's more complicated, I would say, with the adults, because especially if you're operating in a small community like we are doing, some especially older men with power can be a bit reluctant to change. And this is, of course, a major change, that the kids suddenly have access to these things, and the kids suddenly become on a completely different level in terms of independent thinking, in terms of knowledge. And we've experienced that maybe local leaders are not always as excited as the kids.
So the power dynamics would shift.
Definitely. I can just give a concrete example that before, these kids who had a huge potential, they would still in Ghana. It's also very hierarchical society. So in the classroom, if the teacher would tell them something, they would expect to be quiet and just accept whatever the teacher is saying, and that this is knowledge and this is the truth. And the same if they would go to a church and listen to the pastor, that the things that the pastor is saying is the truth. You can't challenge that. You can't question that. But now a lot of our kids have learned how to maybe falsify or verify information. They heard something that didn't really make sense, and then they look it up online, and then they read about it, and then, yeah, that was actually not true. And then they have the tools now and the knowledge to kind of question authority. And I think that's quite, I mean, it's remarkable and it's really cool, but it's also a very powerful tool. And we have to be a bit careful, of course, with how the local leaders are reacting to this. Yeah.
So what started out as an idea of giving equal rights for IT education is now actually shifting much more when it comes to the freedom to be able to choose and think for yourself. That's, as you say, quite remarkable. Yeah.
Definitely, and I think if I just follow up on that as well, I think a really big change as well has been the fact that almost 50% of our students are girls, and the gender roles in Ghana are very different from in Sweden. So a lot of girls are expected to help out a lot at home and expect to at a very early age help out the family to essentially with an income. So even though most girls in Ghana go to school, right after school they're usually expected to help out selling things on the streets or things like that. And then when we start a project and we say 2 hours a day after school we provide free IT classes, come here. Then we felt also that some parents and some families, of course, expect their girls to come home straight away. And computers is not for them. It's they could accept that their sons would go there, but not the daughters. So that was also, I think, like challenging local society in a lot of ways. And we had to develop a certain model to solve that, which is essentially that we're stepping in and we're not only providing these classes for free, but we're helping a lot of girls in their education. Those girls who are coming to our classes every day and learning, they also get completely covered in terms of school-related fees and medical expenses. So our organization is essentially paying for the school uniforms, for their books, if they get sick, hospital bill, vaccinations, and things like that. And from our perspective, that became kind of our strong argument towards their families and say, look, if you are ready to support your girls going to school every day and learning these things, we take care of the expenses. We pay for that. So you don't have to worry about that. And most of the families accepted that because the families most of the parents still want the girls to go to school. It's just a matter of that they felt before that they couldn't afford it, that they had so many expenses and the girls had to provide for the family financially. So this is kind of our way to tackle that problem.
So it really is affecting the culture. Now, what will be the biggest change that you've seen so far in cultural kind of change in this? It sounds like you're providing a lot of safety for a lot of these children.
Yeah, I think maybe the gender perspective is very strong. You can see it very, very clearly that these families now, some of these girls are extremely sharp and talented and skilled. And it shifted the dynamics, I think, in the family. Maybe some of these girls have brothers who are not super good in school, and now their parents expect the girl to pursue, to higher education and maybe get a really good job, more so than their son. And before, they would just expect the girl to maybe after school just, work in the house, help out in the house. So that's a really big shift. But I think that the more long-term effects we will see later on, when these kids who are now teenagers, when they become adults, what that means for local society, what that means for this individual, and what it means for their families. I think it's yet to see. Maybe in a few years, if we can have a follow-up interview, we'll see like the more long-term effects of this.
So you've been growing up in Sweden and Swedish education. Is there a difference for you in general when you do you see differences in the way you're educating from how they've been doing it in Ghana in a sense?
Very much so. It's a lot of big differences, and I would say the thing I mentioned before briefly is the hierarchical society in Ghana. The authority that the teacher has in the classroom is very different from how it looks in Sweden. And then things that we have completely forbidden and abandoned in Sweden is still used and enforced every day in Ghana, which is essentially caning kids, beating up kids. Of course, this is something we banned completely from day one in our facilities. In our academies, there is no violence. There's no even a threat to violence. But in the regular schools, when the kids go to school, the teacher is always carrying around a cane in the classroom. And this is awful. This is disastrous. And they're not even ashamed of using it. So if you, as a visitor, would visit a classroom, sit down there, check out a math lesson in middle school or in primary school, the teacher would give a math problem and ask one of the students to answer it. And the student is trying, but get the result wrong. The teacher will cane the kid, using the cane to beat up the kid. And first time I saw this is a shock. And, you get these kind of like cold, crippling feeling in your whole body that this is so sick, this is so absurd. But you can't really do anything when you're sitting there as a stranger, as a visitor in a classroom. That's what they're doing. It's awful. But what we can do is that we can make sure that this does not happen in our classrooms. And I think we've seen a really big change in how our students are sort of absorbing knowledge. That's one thing, but also how they behave in the classroom. So in the beginning, most of our students were very quiet, very terrified of making mistakes, very afraid of asking questions, which is quite difficult if you're introducing something completely new, even if it's IT or math or whatever it is. If you're afraid of doing mistakes, if you're afraid of asking questions, it will be very difficult to progress and to learn. And they were essentially afraid of doing that because they've been taught in their schooling system, in their educational system, that if I do mistakes, if I say the wrong thing, I will be beaten up. They will beat me. But now, especially those students that we have been coming every day for 4 years, now we can see that they're way more confident in our classroom. If they don't understand something, they raise their hand and they ask a question. I don't understand. Can you explain this to me? They're not afraid of saying the wrong thing or trying new things. So this is really it's a remarkable shift. But I still can't guarantee that they will behave like this in their own classroom if they have just like a regular class with a regular teacher who's standing there with a cane. I'm not sure that they are at that confident in that context, but at least they know that there is one forum every day where they not only accessing information and knowledge and learning new things, but they're safe. They can sit there and they're safe. And I think that's something that I'm really proud of, that we've been able to create that in these two villages.
When you're sharing this, it's really easy to understand why this is so much more than just education. It's providing an alternative for another kind of life for these children. Yeah. I want to ask you, people who would like to support your organizations, if people, for example, would donate money like for funding, what can people expect from $1 or $10? For example, $10, what could people expect for that amount?
For $10, it's a very substantial amount. It's not so much money in maybe a European or American context, but in Ghana, it's a lot of money for us. So what we would use amounts like this for is essentially enabling more girls to go to school. So what I mentioned before is that we have these scholarship programs, and we call it our digital leader scholarships. So girls who are coming to our classes every day, girls who are willing to learn new things in IT, they get supported. So we're covering their medical expenses. Whenever they get sick, we pay for it. They need a vaccination against polio, diseases like that, we pay for it, malaria, whatever it is. School uniforms, books, but also now we're providing them school lunch, so like nutritious food for lunch, so they're not going hungry to our classes, which we saw before. So $10 is more than enough for 2 girls, I would say, per month with these expenses. So you make with $10 a month, you will make sure that 2 girls who would otherwise maybe be forced to work a lot at home and help out selling things on the street would instead get access to good education and progress in their lives, and maybe in the later on also pursue their dreams, whatever it is, to realize them. So that's yeah, that goes way beyond just like a lunch. That would be kind of like the equivalent in Sweden with $10.
It puts things in perspective.
Yeah.
You could change two girls' lives for a month versus a lunch in Sweden. Yeah. To end this today, is there anything you would like to more people to understand about basically? Is there anything that you think is important that people understand about your cause or education in general in Ghana? Or
yeah, I think it's been a really interesting ride. A lot of challenges that we had to overcome, and we started very small scale, and now we've been achieving way more. But I think also there's a lot of side things that we didn't think about it when I started the project. It's more these kids that we thought about, right? That they should get access to this education. But what we've seen now is also all the jobs that we created on the countryside, small towns in Ghana where unemployment is really high. A lot of people are struggling finding a job, and without a job, you can't support yourself, you can't support your family. So we've created a lot of teaching jobs. We also created a lot of jobs in construction, security, maintenance, cleaning, all these things that I didn't think about so much when we started. But now we can see that these people have gotten jobs. A lot of them were unemployed before, and now they have a way better life than when we started, And it's not charity. We're not giving them money, donations, here, buy something to food. They do a really important work, and they get paid a really good salary for it. And now they can support their families, and they can make sure maybe that their kids pursue higher education and get good jobs. So I think these effects are also very, very cool to follow. And I didn't see it coming when we started, but now we can really see it on so many jobs that we created.
The work you've been doing, it's truly inspirational for me. I wonder where I can find more people who would dedicate that much of your life to this cause. So thank you for doing that. I really hope that it seems to me that it's a natural expansion that you've been seeing, and I'm just guessing that's gonna just continue. So best of luck for this project, and yeah, do you want to say any last words in this interview for today?
Oh, thank you very much. It was really fun to be part of this interview. And for anyone who's listening to this, who's more interested in what we're doing in Ghana, and who maybe want to help out in one way or another, just feel free to shoot me an email. So torsten@itforchildren.org. And I'll be happy to answer any questions you have about the project or about Ghana or about whatever kind of. So feel free to do that.